Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Okay, we're gonna jump right in today because we have something absolutely incredible lined up. I promise you, we are going to transform what might look like just a humdrum list of 20 vocabulary words into a fascinating, high-stakes historical adventure. We aren't just sitting here memorizing dry definitions today, no way. We're actually stepping back into the past to see how language literally builds empires.
So, you might be wondering, what does a 15th century Chinese explorer with a massive fleet of 300 ships have to do with expanding your vocabulary? I know, it kind of sounds like a riddle, right? But look, learning words in isolation, it's a tough slog. But when we anchor those new words to a legendary figure, suddenly they stick. As you'll see, this ancient naval fleet perfectly connects to mastering these words, and honestly, I think you're going to find the whole connection absolutely fascinating.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the legend of Zheng He, then move into words of action and motion, followed by words of conflict. After that, we'll look at describing our world, and finally, mastering words in context. Let's get to it.
Starting with Section 1, the legend of Zheng He, we're anchoring our new vocabulary right in the real-world stakes of 15th century China, a wild era full of warring dynasties, bold diplomacy, and just incredible maritime expansion. Now, right here is Emperor Zhu Di of the Ming Dynasty. But the heart of our story actually centers around a young boy of Persian descent named Zheng He. See, after the Ming armies conquered his home province, Zheng He was captured. But instead of just remaining a prisoner, he somehow became one of the prince's most trusted advisors. How? Well, he did it by gradually insinuating himself into a position of respect. To insinuate means to suggest or hint slyly, or to just kind of edge your way into something indirectly. He didn't kick the door down and force his way into power, he smoothly insinuated himself into the ruler's absolute trust.
And this timeline perfectly captures the dramatic arc of his life. He was born in 1371 and captured by the Ming army in 1381. That severe political turmoil totally disrupted his youth. It broke up and threw his entire world into chaos. But fast forward to 1405, the year of his first great expedition. Despite a deeply disrupted youth, the seeds of foreign relations he planted germinated, meaning they sprouted and really began to grow. Long after his final expedition and death in 1433.
300. Just wow. That is the staggering number of massive ships that set off on his very first expedition in 1405, carrying nearly 30,000 men. At the time, that was literally the largest fleet to ever sail from China. Just hold that immense scale in your head for a second while we look at why the emperor even sent him on this massive mission in the first place.
So the emperor had this super ambitious vision to renovate China, meaning to repair it, restore it, and make it brand new again. Years of vicious, or just extremely severe and painful war had really taken a huge toll. The population was way down, and production had basically stalled out to a mere trickle, meaning it was barely flowing at all, just falling drop by drop. The emperor desperately needed to jumpstart the economy and project some serious power. So he tapped Zheng He to lead this massive fleet. Our source material actually sums it up perfectly with this quote. This adventure was only a foretaste of what lay ahead for Zheng He. A foretaste is like an advance indication, a sample, or a sneak peek. That massive 300-ship expedition, that was just a preview. Zheng He would go on to lead 6 more of these incredible expeditions for the emperor, adding a shiny new notch to his resume, his brief written account of his working experience, every single time.
Now, the really crucial takeaway here is how this history helps us contrast our descriptive words. Take a word like sullen. Sullen means grumpy, surly, or brooding because of some ill humor. The direct opposites of that? Cheerful, blithe, and vivacious. The text makes a great point that even though the young, captured Zheng He was probably pretty sullen and withdrawn at first, he didn't stay a brooding, sullen boy for long. Nope, he stepped up, became a leader, and literally changed history.
Moving on to Section 2, words of action and motion. We're shifting gears from these historical legends to words that describe high energy and actual physical movement.
Let's look at hurtle. To hurtle means to rush violently, dash headlong, or to fling forcefully. Imagine the sheer, violent rush of a space capsule separating from its booster rocket. It doesn't just lazily drift away, it hurtles through space. It's a super dynamic, powerful action word. And you can easily apply these action words to vivid, everyday situations too. We just talked about a capsule that'll hurtle through space, but contrast that intense movement with a passenger stepping down to alight from a small airplane.
Alight just means to get down from or step down from the air or land. We can also picture a heavy spring runoff that slowly dwindles down to just a trickle falling from a rusty old pipe. Do you see how effectively these action words paint a literal moving picture in your mind?
Okay, Section 3, Words of Conflict. We are transitioning our narrative away from physical action and into the friction and tension of human interaction.
Our key word right here is truce, which is a temporary peace or a pause in fighting. Imagine two really reluctant, warring nations. After incredibly tense, nail-biting negotiations, they might finally agree to a 5-day truce. Now, it's not a permanent fix, but it's a much-needed ceasefire that just hits the pause button on the conflict.
And we see this conflict vocabulary popping up in practical situations all around us. For instance, a loud demonstration on the street might disrupt or totally break up an important meeting. A vicious or spiteful rumor can severely damage a really good friendship. But on the flip side, making things right often requires recompense, like, say, grandparents giving a reward to a little girl as recompense for finding their lost puppy.
Section 4. Describing our world. Let's explore some descriptive vocabulary that helps us paint really vivid pictures of our environment and our day-to-day lives.
Notice the stark contrast we have here. Barren means unproductive, sterile, or desolate. The total opposites, the antonyms, are fertile and fruitful. Our source material actually compares the dry, adjacent, meaning next to or neighboring, lands of Mongolia, which were rather barren, to highly productive, rich soil. Seriously, just visualizing a dry, dusty wasteland right next to a lush green garden permanently locks that word barren right into your memory.
We also need great descriptive words for the ordinary stuff, right? You might commute from adjacent suburbs just to do some humdrum household tasks, meaning they are dull, totally routine, and without variation. Or maybe you get stuck in an interminable wait at the train station. You know, a wait so long it literally feels endless. And if you're a leader, you might intentionally leave the trivial details, those minor, unimportant, commonplace things, to your subordinate officers.
Finally, Section 5, Mastering Words in Context. We're going to look at how an absolute master storyteller applied these exact same words in some legendary literary classics.
The one and only Edgar Allan Poe is going to be our ultimate testing ground for vocabulary in action today. Back in 1850, Poe published The Mystery of Marie Roget. Let's look at how he utilizes the words we've just been talking about to build incredible tension and atmosphere in his text.
In respect to the insinuations leveled at Beauvais, you have already fathomed the true character of this good gentleman. Remember earlier how Zheng He insinuated himself into power? Well, here, an insinuation acts as a sly, indirect hint or suggestion leveled at a character. It's not shouted out loud, it is quietly hinted at or implied.
And this brilliantly illustrates the versatility of these words. In Misfound in a Bottle, Poe writes about a dull and sullen glow without reflection. Now, we just used sullen to describe a grumpy, brooding person, right? But Poe uses it here to describe a literal glow. A sullen glow means it is gloomy, slow-moving, and totally lacking bright reflection. It's amazing how that word brings a dark, heavy mood to the physical environment itself. Let's look at one more example, this time from Poe's The Gold Bug. He writes, "The error, however trivial in the beginning, increased as we proceeded with the line." This beautifully shows how trivial defines a small, minor, really unimportant mistake early on. But in the context of the story, that tiny, petty error balloons into a massive problem as the narrative proceeds.
We've covered a lot today. Ancient empires, soaring spacecraft, and classic literary mysteries all through the lens of specific, powerful vocabulary. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Will your vocabulary remain barren and unproductive, or will you use the things we've covered in this explainer to let these words germinate and grow into a truly powerful resume for your own life? The choice is entirely yours. Keep learning, keep growing, and I will see you next time.